Morning, everybody. So this video will talk about don't drink the Kool-Aid. That's driving me nuts. I can't look at that one. All right, let's go back with this one. Um, you know, companies, especially non-union companies, they do a lot of marketing. Outside the company to attract drivers, and inside the company to retain drivers. It's the rah speech. It's like let's go team. you know, uh, After a while, it's kind of like brainwashing the employees. And I always encourage people to remain skeptical. Keep your eyes out for better opportunities. If there's a better carrier out there, then you should at least explore the idea of changing carriers. Uh, it's one of these things where you would like to believe everything the company tells you, but does that make sense? I mean, is that wise to take their word for everything? How many times have a company asked you for a favor and you do it, and then the next day, you know, they forget all about it. So you went from hero to zero in 5 seconds. So this is the idea of don't drink the Kool-Aid. You're not doing yourself any favor by leaving yourself open to being exploited by these corporations. So there are certain terms that lean towards this idea of promoting the corporations. Things like larger than yourself, be part of something larger than yourself, uh, teamwork, together, things like this. These are words that corporations often use to make you feel like you're part of a family. The corporation is your family. Nothing could be further from the truth. If there is one problem that you might have, um, where you're not able to drive, more than likely they're going to drop you faster than a sack of potatoes. So this is the idea of don't drink Kool-Aid, because you're they're setting you up to in my opinion, they're setting you up to be taken advantage of. Um, Even at Crete, they do a lot of window dressing, and window dressing in the business world is kind of like fancy packaging. It's like we make it sound great. We make it look great. To attract drivers to come join. Once you're there, it's a completely different story. Now, I've been with Crete for over 10 years, and so I've seen a lot of changes, and the changes have been significant, and they've been for the better. So is Crete guilty of some of this window dressing? I would say in years past, perhaps, but they've gotten better. And it's kind of like you got to walk the talk. You talk, a lot. Corporations, CEOs, they talk about their companies in glowing terms, you know, but do they actually do the walk? That's the part you want to pay attention to. Do they actually do what they say they do? Because talk is cheap, right? We all know this. They could say whatever they want, you know, to attract drivers, but do they actually back it up? So I would say Crete does a pretty good job. Obviously, yeah, otherwise I wouldn't have stayed with him for so long. There's been times when my truck broke down, especially my 2012 truck. I purchased two trucks from Crete. The first one was kind of a lemon. It broke down quite often. And, if the truck was at Freightliner for a week or longer, Crete would, offer me to rent one of their trucks, one of their company trucks, so I could keep hauling loads, keep making money while my truck was getting fixed. Now, that that builds brand loyalty, because they're helping me out, So, is that an example of they're actually backing up, the talk? I think so. It's like you can't get that at anywhere else. You can't get that at Schneider or Landstar or Mercer, as far as I know, where they're going to loan you a truck while your truck is being fixed. I've never seen that anywhere else. I've never seen another company offer that to their independent contractors or owner operators. So, yes, you want to be skeptical and you don't want to drink the Kool-Aid, but you also want to give them credit where credit is earned. So in this example, I think Crete has earned, that that respect, at least from me. But I still am skeptical. I still hold them accountable. I still, make sure that for my business needs that they do what they say they're going to do. And a lot of companies don't. A lot of companies promise great miles, great pay, great benefits, great cooperation, great place to work, things like this. I think Crete actually does try, and trying is often good enough for me. It's like, I don't expect them to be perfect. I just want them to try. A lot of companies don't even try, so I do give Crete credit for that. But on the other hand, I'm still, not naive enough to believe that, if, like, for example, if you were in a small accident, Crete's not going to like that, and or if you had some kind of safety problem, Crete's not going to like that, so as long as you can service Crete, they'll treat you pretty good. But if you have a problem, they're going to drop you fast. They're going to drop you incredibly fast. And you're going to be like, well, what happened to this? We're in it together. Oh, that was just window dressing. What happened to Crete family? I thought we were part of a big family. Oh, that was just talk. But I think as bad as corporations are, Crete might be one of the least bad ones. How's that sound? Because I wouldn't trust any corporation really. I'm so jaded from so many years of experience working for bad companies that I don't trust any corporation. I don't care what they say. I'm very jaded towards companies. But that being said, I would say Crete's the best of the worst. It could be worse. It could be a lot worse. So are they perfect? No. Do I drink the Kool-Aid? No. I mean, if there was a better company out there, that could demonstrate to me that they're a better place for me to do business, I would at least think about it. I would at least consider it. I'm not so blinded by loyalty to Crete that I wouldn't consider other opportunities. You often see this with company drivers, for example. If they're happy, this might be the best job they've ever had, and so they bleed Crete. They're so loyal. They worship Crete. I'm like, no, you don't want to go that far. I'm like, granted, they're not bad, but I wouldn't go that far. And this is part of being an independent contractor is that, if there's any corporation out there that you're going to, uh, you know, bleed for, it should be your own corporation. It's your business that you should be loyal to. Even if you're just a one-person operation, you know, drink your own Kool-Aid. Why are you drinking someone else's Kool-Aid? Promote yourself. You know, think in terms of what's best for you. Um, if your interests and the company interests are in alignment, great. Oftentimes they are not. You know, um, I would say over 10 years there were a couple occasions when I wanted to leave Crete, and I told Crete that, and I was prepared to leave. But then a couple things changed, and then I ended up staying. But they've done tremendously well with their dispatching and operations. That was one of the reasons why I was going to leave in the first place. Um, it used to be really, really bad. I mean, we're talking several years ago, but it used to be owner operators were leaving Crete because of dispatch and operations. You would you would deliver a load. This is how bad it used to be. You would deliver a load and then you would wait an hour to 2 hours to get your next load. Meanwhile, your clock is ticking, right? You're not making any money while you're sitting there waiting for that next load. So this was driving owner operators absolutely nuts. Because whether you make a profit or not depends on how productive you are. And here you have a highly inefficient dispatching service. So it's not forced dispatch, but you know, they just can get you a load in a timely manner. And then what happened was is that they changed that for the better, thank God. And now you get a load offer, usually 3 load offers. You pick which one you want, you know, prior to you delivering your current load. So you used to have like load anxiety where, it was like, you're going to deliver that load and you knew that dispatch was going to screw you over. This happened on a daily basis. Well, now that's gone away. And that was a big reason why owner operators left Crete, was because they wanted to get on a load board at Schneider, for example, and just do it themselves because the dispatching was so bad. So these are things that you got to remind yourself that you're in business for yourself. You're not attached to that company, even if it is a good company like Crete. Other things that Crete done that was impressive was they've redone a lot of their terminals, and some of their terminals were really kind of dumpy, but now they're like state of the art. So that makes a big difference. Now you got a safe place to park, a clean shower, washer and dryers that actually work, and it takes a lot of stress off the drivers, but they know, if they can reach the terminal, they're going to be, have a good place to park. It used to be that wasn't always the case. So don't ever, adhere to the company line 100%. It's okay to be an owner operator and like the carrier you're leased on with. That's good. That's healthy. It's that shows that it's working. That the relationship is strong. That's perfectly fine. But don't think for a second if you had a problem they won't drop you. They will. Corporations, no matter who they are, will always behave in a similar fashion. Push come to shove, you're just a number, and they will drop you so fast, and you'll be like, oh, I thought I was part of something larger. Like, nope, you believe that hook, line, sinker. You're not. You're nothing. You're a number. So this is where you got to kind of protect yourself. It's a good run while it lasts. Will it last forever? Maybe if you're lucky, it'll last till you retire. But don't be surprised that corporations act like corporations do, and that is the corporations come first and you come last. All right, guys, that's all I got for you. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the internet.